right. So I do believe we are live and we are connected because I am going to try to do something a little different today because, schedule BS and whatnot has meant that we haven't gotten out the kind of content we normally try to do in a given week, month / series of months. So as many of you know, we're trying to rejuggle content. So one of the things I've been thinking of doing is what we're starting, what I am starting here today, which is a series I have lovingly titled Pastor Don's Drivetime DGAF. If you don't know what DGAF stands for, look it up. I'm not going to tell you quite yet. For those of you who are new to me, new to our church community, new to our channel, and don't know what exactly it is that we're doing, this is probably going to involve some swear words, some stuff that may be less comfortable for you to hear. That's okay. That's perfectly allowed. We do that here, and we should do that. But if you are one of a more sensitive mindset, this might not be the stream for you because I will be, probably swearing my ass off. The purpose of this particular series as I'm starting it is for me to take advantage of something that, quite frankly, not a lot of pastors have, which is the ability to speak their mind. And so I'm going to do that. Not just that, I am going to do it loudly, and I'm going to do it at volume. Pardon me, I keep checking to make sure that things are actually set up properly. They seem to be, but then again, this streaming software, God only knows if it's doing it right. I still haven't gotten used to our mobile setup. Anyway, I have, by virtue of role and position, as well as the community that I am pastoring, the ability that a lot of pastors don't, which is the ability to speak forthrightly and directly and honestly and at volume and all swears included, which a lot of pastors just plain do not have. So I'm going to do that. I'm honestly just going to do that. Now, I'm going to give you some background on some things here if you are new to all of this. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Don Van Antwerp, and I'm the pastor of Unfinished Community, which is the weird, crazy, experimental, online kind of mostly, but also a little bit in person sometimes when we can manage it, church plant. We got people all around the world. When the main focus of what we're doing is to bring together people who don't have another church home. So as a result of that, this community, in order to function, needed a pastor who could be well described as, DGAF, which is kind of me. I've never been much for a filter, and a lot of Protestant ministers kind of are very much filter-based, and that's where I'm going to kind of start today with my rant is, fucking capitalism. Most pastors out there have to maintain that kind of milquetoast, inoffensive attitude for actual reasons. Now, it may surprise some of you to hear this, but the grand majority of Protestant pastors, particularly of the old school variety, want to be out there in the streets fist-fighting ice with the rest of them. And a good number of us are these days, I'll admit. Many of my colleagues have been, say, for example, shot in the face or have organized whole communities against it, but it is a rarer thing to see. And the reason it's rare is because of how we do things. Now, in order to understand this, I'm going to have to kind of designate 3 different groups within the Christian umbrella. The first one being Catholic and Catholic adjacent is how I would describe it. That means your Catholics, your Orthodox, your Anglicans, your Episcopals, and to a certain extent your Lutherans as well. Now, this is not a theological distinction. I'm making this distinction simply for how pastors operate. And this group, the group 1, the Catholic adjacent group, are the ones that maintained post-Reformation much of that Catholic leadership and church placement structure. So if you are a priest within those traditions, your congregation doesn't really have that much of a say in whether you're there or not. When you get as far as the Lutherans, it's a little more on balance. But it is an appointment system. It's not entirely an elective system. And so there is very much a top-down authority involved in that. Now, the next side of things, we get the Protestant system, which, again, I'm generalizing here. This is not a theological distinction. And here is where I would put your Reformed Protestants, your Presbyterians, what have you. Pretty much every variation thereof, good and bad under the sun. And in those cases, of which I'm one, as part of the Reformed Church in America, that distinction, again, as far as pastoral placement goes, means that we apply for our positions much as you would apply to any other job. And then the church gets to decide who they want. It's a congregational decision. And you are henceforth then answerable to said congregation to maintain that job. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages to both systems. The appointment system has a big advantage in the fact that you're not answerable to the local politics of the community. The overall church, the denomination, they're the ones who pick whether you're there or not. So who the hell cares if you speak out against it? If the church gets angry, the church gets angry. You're there by, for example, the appointment of the bishop, or in some cases, the pope. Now, of course, this leads to other situations in which case you might have, say, a very progressive community that's been given a conservative priest to, whip them back into shape, and it winds up very uncomfortable for everybody. On the flip side, the Protestant community, where we have to apply for and are therefore answerable to our congregations, has a real democratic flair to it. It's wonderful, and it connects pastors to communities in a very particular way. But then there's capitalism, which is, and I'm going to use the technical term here, bullshit. Because of capitalism, pastors are not just answerable to their congregations theologically, but economically as well. The systems that were originally designed to create a loving relationship within a parish, whereby the pastor lives and works among them and receives their pay from that particular congregation, and in many cases even has housing provided for at the church in many cases, like their own parsonage at the church. All of this was designed to connect the pastor to a community in the way that, say, our Catholic and Catholic adjacent siblings didn't really do. Great idea, sure, fine, but then enter capitalism, and particularly late-stage capitalism, and now we have a situation where many pastors can't speak out against injustice because political polarization will cost them their jobs. You say the wrong thing, you speak in an incorrect way, and suddenly out come the pitchforks. I've been the victim of this as well. And so I'm going to go ahead and say it right now that the usual line along which that splits is wealth. And for myself, I lost my last position because I pissed off the rich people in the congregation. And you shouldn't have did that, because then you don't have a job anymore. I tend to be that kind of guy who says, the hell with it, and speaks against the rich people anyway. But then again, that's probably why I didn't keep that job. So we wind up with a lot of pastors who have to do the calculus differently, who cannot, they say they have vulnerable family members, or they need that health insurance for themselves, or they just have no other jobs lined up. Suddenly that sermon about how the rich should give everything away, camel through the eye of the needle, Sermon on the Mount stuff, suddenly looks a little scarier from the pulpit, because you could walk away from that pulpit with no job. So that's kind of that. But you may be thinking, oh, Pastor Don, you said there are 3 groups. And yes, there is a third group, which longtime followers of our channel will know that I do not qualify as Christian because of their origins as a political movement and not as a part of the church, because they were an organization of cultists brought together by politicians, given the devil's bargain, and then they took it full-heartedly and were just like, yes, give me all that power, please. Thank you, political daddy. And this is where we have evangelicals now. But I am going to bring them into this conversation because, well, they are not, by any theological distinction I will make, Christian. They are structurally derived in part, largely, from Protestantism as far as their internal functional structures go. And I know that when a lot of people look at churches, they do group evangelicalism together because most people aren't aware of the underlying history and theology, and I get that. So I'm going to look at evangelicalism as well, because you look at all these megachurches and you may be thinking, well, Pastor Don, megachurches, they are flourishing. They have so much money and resources, and those pastors do seem to be saying whatever the hell they want. And you know what? You're right. They are. But That's because they've taken the third track of dealing with a capitalist society, which is saying whatever you have to get money. Now that's the flip side of things. Like on the far side, we've got the Catholic and Catholic adjacent folks who can say whatever they want because they're on an appointment, but often have to answer to the overall conservative policies of appointment-based societies. On the middle ground, you've got the Protestants who are, subject to the congregation and don't have the freedom of appointment system, but also, for many of us, lack the ethical, shall we say, freedom of our evangelical quote-unquote friends who have taken the 1980s approach to it, the greed is good approach, the, fuck it, I'm going to do what I want, give me mine, and will absolutely fleece the hell out of a group of people by giving them everything they could possibly want, drawing them in with, frankly, bullshit, and just spraying it around the place until the money comes rolling. So for a lot of us Protestant ministers, we're stuck in the middle. We don't want to be evangelical preachers because we don't want to manipulate people into a false sense of community. But at the same time, we are beholden to our congregations. So if we piss them off because of all this political BS, that's a real possibility. We might wind up out of a job ourselves. So a lot of my colleagues have to walk that incredibly narrow tightrope. And the end result of it is what I have often called the inactive church, which is the majority of our congregations which just aren't doing anything. Like, we've seen an entire cult system rise up over the last 60, 70, 80 years, and most churches have just been like, oh, well, I guess we have to agree to disagree. And it's largely because their pastors and leadership are just terrified, because if they piss off the wrong people, there it is. And at the heart of it, the wrong people that you might be afraid of pissing off are, you guessed it, the wealthy people. Now look, I have said it before, I've said it again, and I have done so because Jesus said it first. Wealth is a problem. So if you are watching our stuff, if you are part of our community or adjacent to our community, and you are wealthy, then the message of Jesus to you is clear. Your calling is clear. Take that money and either give it to the church or start using it to do some freaking good in the world. Don't keep it for yourself. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, Pastor, I'm not wealthy, I'm just kind of middle class, you're wealthy. Like, statistically speaking, if you are not in abject poverty right now because of the distribution of income in the United States and its adjacent countries, if you are not poor, you're rich. Like, there isn't a middle class anymore. There isn't a middle ground. You either have enough money to survive or you don't, and most of us don't. And the role of the church is to make sure that those on the bottom 90% or so that don't are still able to survive. So if you're not part of that bottom chunk of folk, then you should be, I'm sorry, giving everything you have to help serve the poor and bring the rest of us back up to parity. Now, this is where we run into problems, because churches asking for money is a bit of a trigger for a lot of folk because, again, thank you evangelicals and mega churches and bullshit like that, because you've kind of poisoned the well. People assume it's malicious. People assume that pastors are doing it just to line their own pockets, which we're not. But also, in a capitalism, the church has to pay for the pastor because we also need to survive, and this is our full-time job. So you see, it's a complicated kind of circle here. Now, having gone through all of that is really just me explaining why I'm doing what I'm doing and why I'm able to do what I'm doing, because, again, I'm in a rare position. My community is incredibly supportive of the work that we're doing here with, how should we say, not giving a fuck. And even if they weren't, my position is such that what's going to happen? I mean, I am still ordinarily answerable to my denomination, of course, and I do my best to make sure that everything I say is theologically in keeping with the teachings of Jesus, but at the same time, like, I'm not beholden to the structural systems that trap a good many of my colleagues. And by living in Japan, I don't get to go out and fist fight ICE, but I can get out here and I can drop the pretense and tell you guys what's up. So that's what this whole series is about. Now, a couple of times a week, I do teaching up at the university here in town, and I've got this 30-minute drive time in which I'm not doing a whole hell of a lot other than just listening to podcasts and stuff. And, well, I think it's about time for us to talk, as it were. So that's that's what this is about. So that is the background information, and having given you that, I am not going to give it again on future episodes of this whole thing. I'm just going to keep doing the thing. So today, what I actually want to talk about, having given you that whole separate spiel before this, what I actually want to talk about is the life and function of a church. Like, what the hell is it for? And I've been not as active in posting as I ought to have been, but I have been poking around on Threads and Blue Sky and stuff, and it's a question I've seen echoed a lot. What the hell is a church for? Now, of course, many of my colleagues who are doing things get active in the comments of these to say, well, homeless shelter, food kitchen, all the other stuff, organizing space, all of which are true, particularly in communities where the concept of a community center doesn't really exist anymore. Churches tend to operate that way. But a church is meant to be more than that. Now, fair warning, content warning, trigger warning, if you like. We are entering into the phase of the spiel here, where the more eagle-eyed listeners may be like, ooh, Pastor Don's sounding awful communist now. Well, guess what? So it was Jesus and the apostles that followed him, so just fucking deal with it. The role of the church is to function as basically the driving engine of community. If you look back to the Middle Ages and before, notwithstanding all the horrors and missteps of the church, you look at most communities, they were built around churches, and the way the system operated top down was feudalism, right? But bottom up, the churches operated within the communities by providing health care, by providing food, by providing resource support, and lifting up while the feudalism was pushing down. It wasn't always universally like this, but this was the overall structure, and that was carried over from previous social institutions all the way back to the early church, where they all lived as one accord. They all sold all their possessions. They shared all the money equally, distributed. They were a commune. They were communists. The early Christians were communists. Communists. We're communists. Okay? All of us. That's the thing. Political arguments aside, when we think of communists, I know boomers will be immediately going into full Red Scare mode at this point, going, oh my God, the Reds are coming up. Okay, first off, Soviet communism and its successor Chinese communism are a form of political communism, and political communism is basically fascism with a fancier name and theology behind it. And I say theology because, like Soviet communism was effectively atheist, but they were operating it like a belief system anyway, so I think the term still applies. But the basic principle behind it was give all you have to the government, and the government will be, your overarching daddy who will see to the fair distribution, which is different from proper communism or Christian communism, in which case everything is just simply shared and everybody takes honorably and honestly because we all believe in what we're doing and because we all believe in the rightness and justice of God, who is compelling us to act with care and love for our neighbor. This here is the flaw in communism as a political system, because, you can't bank on love of neighbor as a universal, because not everybody believes in that, and there are always humans who don't follow the Christian belief system. There are always humans who believe in the whole greed is good mentality, thus, again, evangelicals. So if you want it to work, you then have to mandate it, in which case the government becomes big daddy fascist, and then we're back to fascism again. So outside of a shared social contract and belief system that stresses love of neighbor, communism as an applied system doesn't work. Now, that being said, churches still are supposed to carry as much of that communist nature into the modern age as we can. Now, we are supposed to be the place where those who buy into community come to have community, and we are supposed to be providing everything that the world can't, and helping people to access the things that the world can. So, not simple. Come on, it's me. It's not going to be simple. But in the simplest terms, I'm going to hearken back to a Star Trek novel from the 1970s, which eagle-eyed followers of me and my preaching will know I have talked about before. I want to say it's 74, 75, 76, somewhere in there. a post-original series novel called Kobayashi Maru, which, again, I'm sure at this point has been decanonized about 6 different ways and then became canon, whatever. Ruled out by physics because at one point it has Scotty transporting a torpedo, which the physics have kind of been settled that doesn't work. So a lot of reasons for it not to be considered canon, but still a damn good story. And I always come back to this one because throughout it, you've got all the different kind of core crew of the Enterprise talking about their solutions to the Kobayashi Maru, the no-win scenario test. But in the middle of it, you've got young Ensign Chekhov, who isn't command track and therefore did not take that test. But he still has to tell a story because it's a book, and, him just sitting there going, yes, Captain, for, some 300 pages is going to be kind of silly. So what he tells is the story of his time in security officer training. And what happens in this is he and all of his other fellow security cadets get dropped off on an abandoned base on the moon or somewhere, I forget exactly where, and they're all given stun phasers, and they're told that their job is to be here and to wait for rescue. And each one is individually told that one of the fellow cadets has been given the role of terrorist or something, and the whole role of this other person is to take everybody out. And so they're all security officers in training, so they all go through this scenario, looking for and trying to shoot the terrorist character, the one who's supposed to be trying to take everybody else out. A perfectly normal thing to do from the perspective of the 1970s. Drop a bunch of kids in an abandoned place, give them guns, and say, one of you is a terrorist. Notwithstanding, I'm not worried about the underpinnings of the terrible social construct that led to that idea, but I am interested in how the solutions were played out. Now, young Ensign Chekhov, of course, because it's a story that we want to follow, goes full Rambo. Like, we're talking, knife in teeth, crawling through conduits. This guy is Rambo meets friggin' Bruce Willis in Die Hard, the whole deal, and it is just wild. It ends with Chekhov strapping half a dozen phasers to his chest as a basically makeshift stun bomb, trapping a whole bunch of people in a bathroom and blowing everybody up, which is wild. And then you get to the end, and he wakes up in the hospital because, of course, detonating a bunch of phasers around your body is, even in that universe, not good for you. He wakes up in the hospital, and they explain, and he's like, did I get the imposter? And trying, I think, very hard not to laugh, his instructor explains to him there never was an imposter. We wanted to see how you handled the situation. And oh my God, dude, you killed almost everybody. What the hell? The whole thing was actually an experiment in how you handle fear and prejudice, and Chekhov failed hilariously. But before they move on, they take a moment and mention that, dear friend and functional superhero of the story, Jim Kirk, also took this test too, because of course he did. And then they give you what was Kirk's solution to this test. And what he did is Kirk got a couple of his buddies together, and he secured the cafeteria, and he put guards on every entrance. And then as soon as they saw anybody, they said, hey, come in here. We heard there's an imposter out about and somebody who's going to get taken care of. So what we're going to do, we're holding the cafeteria, and this will be our safe spot. You want to come in here, you will be safe, we will protect you, but you surrender your weapons. And then they waited until they had all the cadets accounted for in the cafeteria, put all the weapons in a pile and set them to self-destruct, and then sat there and waited for pickup. Perfect. It is a perfect solution. And, in typical we worship Jim Kirk fashion of the original series and the boomers who followed it, naturally perfection comes from Captain Kirk. But that one always resonated with me because that's the role of the church. Like that right there. That is what the church is supposed to be. We are supposed to be the ones who, stand around the entrance of our communities and our areas and our spaces and say, look, stand down your weapons, come on in, we'll protect each other, and we'll take care of each other, and we're not going to hurt you. You don't want to come in, that's fine. Like, you can go and take your chances out there, all good. But come in here, we'll ask you to disarm, we'll ask you to be peaceful and abide. And when the whole world's disarmed, we're in good shape. Our goal is to invite people in and take care of them in any way we can and to protect. That's what a church does. So in the modern era, what we're supposed to be doing is exactly that. Our churches should be, well, sanctuaries. And I don't just mean that in the structural sense, like having a place of worship. Our church should be the place where you go to when all other places are impossible. The church should be the place where you go to when you have no other place to go. I'm not joking in the fact that I really do think that churches should be doing all sorts of stuff to serve the needs of their communities. The people in your congregations should be making medicines and making food and making bandages and doing everything you can to help people who need it. We should be finding what the needs in our local communities are, the resources that they're lacking, and making them ourselves. Community gardens, nothing. Why are we not manufacturing simple medicines and stuff like that people can use? Like, we've got plenty of witchy folk in our community. They know how to do this shit. Why aren't we doing it? There's a lot of stuff that a church can and should be doing. Many of us are. Many colleagues I know back in the United States, in my own classes, for example, their churches are open damn near 24/7. They're operating affordable housing institutions. They're operating legal services. They're operating any number of different things, day in and day out. It's not just Bible studies and worship service on Sunday. So what is a church for? A church is for everything that people can't get. So if you live in this world and you don't have access to reliable food, you should be able to go to the church and say, hey, y'all got any food I can have? And they should be like, yes, definitely. Come on in, have a meal. We got you. If you don't have blankets or clothes, you should be able to go to the church, and the church would be like, yeah, we got it. You're all good. But not as a, we will sell it to you, or we will exchange it with you, or if you meet our needs. That's the way it should work, as a shared distribution. And yes, that brings me back to the fact that the wealthy members of the community should be giving it up and making sure that the money to do this exists within the community, and the poor people in the community should be giving their time and their efforts to try and make sure that everyone else can be lifted up as well. If you are a sewer, you should be helping to make clothes. If you're a gardener, you should be helping to grow food. If you are a cook, you should be in the kitchens when you can, helping out. If you're a writer or a social media person, you should be we should all be doing those things, because that's what community is for. And the church's role is to be the center of that. That's what church is for. And so then again, we come to our unique congregation, which doesn't really have a physical center in the way a lot of other churches do. The role of our church is to provide information and to provide escape and to provide community and connection for those who can't get it. A lot of the people in our community don't have any access to church or church community. They don't have friends. There are people in our community who have been living in oppressively MAGA states or even households as LGBTQIA members, and can't even express themselves without fear of violence. And they can't go to church and find a church home for the same reason. So they come to us. And it's different, but it's something. And this again nurtures us in being able to evolve new techniques and new tactics, for lack of a better word, new technologies and approaches that can be used by other more mainline churches to reach out to people who need that. I'm currently in conversation with another church that wants to use the resources we developed to help build ministry within their local university, with a lot of people who've been reaching out to them but don't have time or means to connect with the church physically. All of this is to say that every church is different, and every church's needs are different, and every church's needs are different because every community's needs are different. That's the rant for now. And I don't want to be the guy who's saying, we need more volunteers. Oh my God, get out there, help us out, give us your money. But, kind of, not in a bad way, but also kind of, we need to be sharing at this point. We are in an era of unprecedented division, an era of unprecedented greed, an era of unprecedented fear, where we never know if our neighbor is going to hurt us or not. And so many, even in progressive circles, have put out the bullshit idea that you have to take care of yourself first. I can't tell you how many times I have heard oxygen mask theory put out there as a justification for doing nothing. The idea being that, well, when you're on a plane and the oxygen masks fall, you have to put your own oxygen mask on first and breathe before you can take care of everyone else, which is functionally true. But at the same vein, it also assumes all the masks came down and work. Okay? If you are somebody who's got big lungs and can hold your breath, and you're in a row of 3 and only 2 masks come down, well, you turn to the little 5-year-old next to you, you give them your mask, and then you start holding your damn breath. Because that's the right thing to do. Yeah, I'm in a brief tunnel, but I still have signal. Yay. But yeah, that's it. That's it in a nutshell. It is not an even distribution right now, and we need to, those of us who have the ability need to be giving, and those of us who don't have the ability need to be finding what we do have in excess and sharing it. We got to get away from the transactional mindset, and we got to get away from the fear. And if we can do that as communities, online or in person, then we're going to wind up in a better place. All right, y'all, I am almost to work, so I'm going to end my rant there for today. I'm going to keep doing these if y'all like them. I hope you do. But for now, I have to admit, less swearing in this one than I thought. I kind of went off in a different direction than I anticipated. But we'll see where we are on Friday when I come back to drive into work again. In the meantime, y'all take care of yourselves. I will catch you when I catch you. There'll be more content to come. Like, share, and subscribe, the usual stuff. You know how this works. The more people get eyes on this, the more people get interested. And yes, if you are one of those rich or quote-unquote middle-class folks, a little money wouldn't hurt. You don't have to give to us, but if you are looking for a place to give, you could certainly use it. All right, everybody. Take care. I'm signing off. We will see you next time we see you. Bye, all.